is, you know? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first show of Liberated Panda, a show about Chinese and American current events from the perspective of
me, Jason Writ, an American born in Pennsylvania, currently living in Texas.
And me, Angel Tang, someone born in China, but now is a Chinese American living in New York City.
So one thing we're seeking to do with this channel is we'd like to provide on our YouTube channel, we want to provide some brief videos to help with an overview of America and how it came to be. So we'll be including stuff about the initial founding of the nation, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights to give everyone a really good background on the nation and what we're trying to put forward on our podcast. And then on our podcast, we'd like to talk about maybe some more current events and some more in-depth issues and take some user questions.
Right. And we're very excited to put out videos explaining what exactly is America, provide American history overview, and all that good stuff. So let's not be oblivious to the elephant in the room. We're about to impeach a president. So my question for you, Jason, is what do you think will be the changes in the Biden administration versus the Trump administration?
Well, I don't think the impeachment really has a major issue on it. I think the biggest deal is we're about to inaugurate a new president. And so so the biggest thing for me would just be you look at the Trump presidency, and if you could define it in one way with American-Chinese relationship, it's that it's very adversarial.
Right.
The Trump administration really took the Chinese on head first and said, you know, this is the elephant in the room of American relations and American foreign policy. And so it was just very, I mean, another Cold War in some aspects, right? There was a trade war. There were kind of some aggressions in different areas. So they were just very adversarial with them. And I think the difference now with the Biden administration, you know, there was a lot of talk about the Biden family and ties to Chinese businesses. But most importantly, I mean, you could see Joe Biden as VP made a lot of trips over to China. He was a big envoy for Barack Obama over to China. And so I think that you're going to see those natural ties. You're going to see a much more pro-Chinese American government, which is not good for Hong Kong, not good for Taiwan, but a very much more pro-Chinese government and how we handle things. You could see some of the trade deals reverting back, maybe more goods made in China, maybe cheaper goods from China, rather than what the Trump administration tried to do, which was move a lot of that trade out of China and into America. I think that we'll see the opposite.
Well, I think, and Jason and I, even though we're both registered Republicans,
we differ in some views.
There's quite a spectrum of like the different types of Republicans. And even though I agree with you in that I don't necessarily know if Biden will be as strong against China. But the thing that I do disagree with you about is back during the Obama administration, right? We didn't really like identify China as like the enemy or like, you know, somebody that like we couldn't do business with. Mm-hmm. So when I see things like Congress, like especially, you know, Hunter Biden and well, the Hunter Biden's another story, but you know, when I see things like Americans and, you know, potentially like politicians, you know, in the past, like going over to China and trying to like, you know, set up business there, like establish like relationships and all that good stuff. Like back then, it wasn't illegal, and like they weren't identified as like an enemy.
Yeah, it wasn't frowned upon. Like you looked, Governor of Georgia, right, with all the election issues that we're seeing there, or
Right.
potentially seeing that was brought into the forefront. Here you have pictures with Chinese foreign ministers. You know, you have Eric Swalwell, the Democrat from Southern California, with getting busted with a Chinese spy, basically. You have, like, the Chinese really tried to put themselves in our government, and we really, honestly, the first person to truly identify it was the Trump administration. Maybe not Trump himself. Some of his trade trade advisors like Peter Navarro is a big China hawk. So I mean, they really brought it to the forefront. Even Steve Bannon, when Trump was still running, Bannon was a big voice in his ear, and Steve Bannon is very, very anti-CCP, and so he brought a lot of those items really to the forefront.
Yes, and I think many, many members of the Chinese American community love Trump because of what he did. Like, he had the audacity to actually confront China, whereas like previous presidential administrations were unwilling to do that, right? They wanted to go the diplomatic route. And I don't blame them. That didn't work. So I give major credit to Trump for starting the tariff war. The thing that I differ with you about, is the efficacy of Trump, the way Trump is fighting China. And I do have my worries about Biden, but I also think that now that he recognizes the dangers of China, as much of the world has, right? Maybe he has that competency. He has the team that he needs to actually put sensible, competent policies in place that will actually, curtail China's increasing power in the world.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest elephants in the room, and you kind of touched on it briefly, is Hunter Biden. I think the FBI recently came out and said that it's confirmed that there's money that flew from inside of bank accounts. So Hunter Biden flew over on Air Force Two. This was outlined many years ago, even when he was still vice president. But Hunter Biden had flown over with his father on Air Force Two and done business with China, which is, to be honest with you, it's highly illegal in terms of the American government. You can't have your kids go with you on official government business to do business deals and then go home. We can talk about all the various things, that connections with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, but the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of smoke and a lot of provable fire that there is deep connections with the Biden family and doing business with China, doing business, we've heard about the Ukraine, doing business in Ukraine, doing business in multiple foreign countries. So to be honest with you, to think that they are going to be they might talk like they're going to be hawks on China, but the fact of the matter is, seeing their history, I would highly doubt if that's the case. Highly doubt. And then when you look at some of his appointments with foreign policy implications, I think his Secretary of State was the lead negotiator in the Iran nuclear deal that the Trump administration rolled back. Right. So I look at that and I say, we're probably going to go back to how it was, which for China is great. It's great. It's a much more globalist agenda. It's a much more, let's source our stuff, our product manufacturing from over there, and we'll just consume it here, rather than Trump, who took a probably more practical approach in that we can't just source everything somewhere else. We got to make some stuff here. So why don't we make the stuff here that we can control our quality manufacturing, make stuff here that we might need in case of the worst case scenario, right? Like, we probably should make computer chips here. We should probably make computers here. We shouldn't be outsourcing stuff for our fighter jets here or to China. We should make it here. And that makes sense. It's pretty practical. Say what you want, but it's a practical foreign policy. And I think we're going to revert back to the previous administration, which is just going to be, we're going to see more stuff made in China. We're going to see the other cheek turned when it comes to, some of the human rights issues that the regime has. And honestly, I don't think it's good news for Hong Kong or Taiwan.
So I guess my question would be, under the Trump administration, right? Like he was talking about sending an executive order to bring manufacture back to America, which I thought was brilliant.
Which he did, but it's still only an EO.
Right. But still, EOs count, right?
Better than what we've had, right?
but he never followed through on that.
So one of the problems with doing that, you're right. Was the follow through exactly what it should be? Probably not. But one of the issues that arise is that these companies that are doing it want long term. And something that China offers is stability. They offer single party rule, so that party is going to be in charge. They have a clear goal. The Chinese government has, the Chinese people, their long goal is 100 years out. The American long goal is 100 days out, okay? Like our Congress changes every 2 years. Our president changes every 4, maybe 8, stuff like that. So it's different when you're doing business here versus there. Right. Companies want long-term stability, especially to put the money out to move. So what the Trump administration did is they did a lot of the background and the basement. They really laid a good foundation to move that stuff back with the tax cuts, with repatriation, with some of the companies that did move back. I mean, Foxconn built a big plant in Wisconsin. Auto manufacturing is getting more here. Some companies are moving back. Some said that they would move back and they haven't yet. But it takes time. It's not something that can even be accomplished in 2 years or 4 years. This is going to take time. It's more than just, it's much more than just one administration. This has to be American policy moving forward, which is why it's really kind of stopped in its tracks right now.
But like I feel like at the end of Trump's administration, right? Like in the beginning, he was on fire, starting the tariff.
Yeah, totally.
Right, starting the tariff war. He did the whole thing with the Huawei. He, like, I mean, I can't. That was like 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
But just now, though, look at him. He just signed a deal to completely normalize Taiwan. So he normalized relations with Taiwan, looking at them as a sovereign nation, not as a part of China, which greatly angered China. I mean, let's be real. Yes. If the shoe was on the other foot, it would anger us too. But I think that's big. But you're right. For the most part, on a trade front, it's been pretty quiet.
Right. And I don't think it has done much to deter trading from China, because I have many import-export friends who still do the same amount of importing from China, and they're just paying the tariffs because it's still cheaper.
Yeah, and that's an issue. I mean, but that you can build that foundation, but at a certain point, you have to add enough building blocks to it to make it work, to make it into a house, right? So we're still working on that, and it has to do with currency manipulation and various other things. Like China can just change your currency, right, to make it cheaper. Like tariffs don't hurt them. Tariffs don't hurt them. And what you're going to see is, when you're looking long term, in my opinion, if you're looking long term at a Chinese versus American trade war, you're not going to see America win that war like in pieces. You're not going to see they win a battle, they win a battle, they win a battle, they win a battle, they win the war. We're used to seeing that. World War II, World War I, in physical terms, we're used to that. But I think with this, what you're going to see is all of a sudden you're going to see a bunch of stalemates, and then, if the U.S. were to win this trade war, it would be China cracked, it's over, kind of out of nowhere, because we're going to hit a point where it's just untenable for them, and the CCP can't keep going and can't keep doing it, and then eventually the population is like, hey, what is this anyway, right? So I think that's how it's going to end. If it ends pro-U.S., if it ends pro-China, obviously it's probably going to be a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and the U.S. just kind of go quietly. So once again, the trade war in a Biden administration, it's over. Like the trade war is over. We're going to revert back, and China won the trade war. They did. With Biden being president.
They're at 10% growth, right? They're on track for 10%.
But are they really?
Okay, I mean, even if they're exaggerating, right? I don't think they're exaggerating from -1% to like 10. So
There's probably some growth, but it's not what it was.
So like, there's a lot of growth because they're like exporting their PPE, right? To like to us, because we don't have like the capacity for.
Well, we do, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because some of these governors, like Gavin Newsom in California, struck deals with the Chinese government to get the PPE, while American PPE is still sitting in warehouses. So you got to figure, when it comes to prices and when it comes to deals, they're striking deals with these politicians to do it. They're going around like the federal government and doing it on a state level, which is very smart for them. It's very smart. They already have established relationships with these politicians. You know, like I said, all these governors, somebody I saw online just posted all these pictures of all these American politicians at a state level with CCP members and trade ministers and stuff. And it's just like one after one after one, every state, every single one of them. Guys who look like they're anti-Chinese are posing for these pictures, you know, in these meetings. So they're getting the trade deals that they need and that they want, and they're going around the federal government for it, which is very smart on their end.
Right.
But I think, honestly, I look at it almost like our own politicians are the ones that are sabotaging
Absolutely
our trade war with China.
Absolutely.
Because it's not beneficial to them. And that's one of the issues with our, you know, with our system of government and our government. It's that our states can go around our federal government for some of these deals. And not everybody has the same priorities. You know, some of these governors want their pocketbooks lined, want their state pocketbooks lined, you know, and they want businesses in their states or whatever benefits seem to come. And, you know, some of them look at it on a bigger scale. So.
Right. And I think one of the dangers, you know, as someone who escaped communist China and got citizenship in America through political asylum, is like there's so much money in China right now because of, like, you know, their population. You have companies like Disney, right? Exactly.
That's all that matters to these politicians,
money speaks.
right?
And like, right, you can't expect Wall Street to do the right thing. You can't expect Steve Jobs as much, you know. What
they're not going to do. Tim Cook's not going to do the right thing.
Right, they're not going to do the right things. Like the NBA people. I mean, you know, unless we have governmental policies that, like, and I'm not saying I'm a proponent of limiting free trade. I'm just like, it just worries me that, like, China's culture of, like, you know, silencing, you know, any like criticisms, like through Disney, right? Disney movies, through through like NBA, which is incredibly popular in China. Like, you know, and you know, I don't know if you heard, but the box office for China this year has far surpassed the box office for America this year. So it's, well, like, I mean,
that's
because of the COVID situation. Right?
Yeah, the box office here is so bad they shut everything down though.
Right,
so
right.
It's tough to judge. But yeah, I see what you mean.
But I'm just saying, like, that the enticement for business people, and I mean, you know, for business people, I think it's just too much. Like, it's just too much green. Like, you know, their eyes are.
Yeah, it is. Look at the growth, right? Like, all the NBA's growth. Honestly, the NBA is losing viewership here, partially because of the pro-Chinese policies, which is fair. The NBA has always been really good on a global spectrum, because basketball is a more global sport. You look at our two other major sports are baseball, which is not really a global sport. It's big in Japan, parts of Asia, parts of Latin America. That's about it. You look at NFL football, right? Not big anywhere except for here. And then you have basketball, which is pretty universal. I mean, next to soccer, is the most universal sport in the world. So the NBA, their ability to capitalize on these markets is great, but it should be expected. You know, I should look at the NBA like I look at Apple, because everybody's using tech over there just like they're using tech here. So, like, it's a global brand. And the NBA is doing what they need to do to protect their brand. Now, the problem lies with all these different businesses is that how do we encourage them that America, you should have American interest first because you should move back here? How do we financially incentivize that? Which China can do because they have all this money in the government. You know, they don't have to disclose where it's being spent. Whereas in the U.S., we pass budgets every year where it gets disclosed and everybody puts their pet projects in and their bridges to nowhere, which is, you know, a common American joke for things, that money that just disappears in the budget, you know, where it gets to a state and it just goes poof for somebody's rainy day fund. I don't know. But, you know, the CCP doesn't have those standards. So they can hand the money out. They can put money in their projects that they want. They can get companies over there. And it's easy for them. The problem is, how does the U.S. incentivize those companies coming back? How does the U.S. incentivize, you know, like, hey, NBA, maybe you should focus on human rights.
And of course, can we expect our companies, our American companies, to actually, I mean, other than, you know, like saying, oh, we care, do they actually care? When it, you know, when it affects their bottom line, I don't think so.
They care when it comes to COVID, right? They care. They all talk about, we care, and we're going to make free shipping, and that's it. We care.
Right.
But then, you know, you're still having, you know, you look at Nike. Do you care? Like, really? Do you care? You don't care. You look at the NBA. Do you really care? NBA cares. It's like their big logo now. Do you really care?
Right.
You don't care.
Of course not.
Let's just be honest. You guys don't. It's a bottom line thing. It is what it is.
Money's their bottom line. And that's why you need the government to come and implement policies. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I guess tariffs are like basically taxing them. I don't know. I mean, if you I believe you've seen American Factory, that documentary that won the best documentary last year. You know,
let's talk about that for a bit, because you really like that.
Oh, I loved it. And I think so many Chinese people who watched it, you know, despite the Great Firewall and not being able to, they loved watching it. And I think to anyone that hasn't seen it, I very much, you know, like think this is that you should see, you know, you should watch this to understand the working condition disparity between people in China and people in America, and why China has been able to get ahead so far. And I think one of the issues, if you watch that movie, even if we bring back manufacturing jobs back to America, right? Like Americans have such a higher standard of living. We have so many regulations, and which I don't necessarily disagree with or agree with. You know, I know we're overregulated, and I wish we, you know, but I understand that there's.
But it's necessary, right? It's
necessary, right? You know, so it's interesting because the Chinese people watching that American Factory and seeing the conditions Americans work under, they were shocked. They were like, wow, we have been shortchanged by our government. Like, it really opened their eyes to the kind of conditions that they could be working under, you know? And I think on the American side, it really opened their eyes to how hardworking Chinese people are, you know? I have no care for safety and everything like that. And that explains how they're able to get so far. So I think one of the biggest challenges is I agree with you. Get manufacturing back to America. Like, let's try to be more self-sufficient. The next pandemic or whatever hits, we want to be prepared for that, right?
We always have to protect ourselves.
Right. But at the same time, like, if they want to do that, then Biden or Congress and like just on every level, we need to get together and like, I don't want to give these, you know, like Fortune 500 companies like tax cuts or anything, but just like enough incentive for them to like want to bring it back. And I think one of the issues is labor laws, right? The labor laws.
Definitely.
Right. As a small business owner myself, the labor laws are like detrimental for a small business to operate, right? Like, you have to pay, you know, like 1.5 after 40 hours. You have to, you know, get payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, workers' comp, benefits, and all of that adds up. And it's just, like, for like a small business, it's untenable to like pay so much, right? So if we can just like change that without Bernie Sanders or like the, you know, people on the far left, like, you know, screaming and hollering like we need a living wage and everything like that, which I agree, we do need a living wage, but I just, you know, I just feel like there needs to be some deregulation of labor laws and some help for, you know, small businesses in the tax.
You remember those pictures? You always see those pictures of the guys on the skyscraper eating lunch, and they're like 1,000 feet up in the air, the black and white ones, right? You always see those and you think, man, those days in America would never exist here now. Guys on skyscrapers just sitting there without any protection, no harnesses. They're just sitting there. They're eating their lunch from their lunchbox, right? And it's like, those iron workers that scale that, like, thank God they have protection now. But it just kind of, in my opinion, I look at that and I don't look at it as like, oh, that's a great heyday. But you're like, you see how things have changed and where in some ways it's better now. I don't want people falling off buildings.
Agreed.
But like, you hear about how these like Indian and migrant workers are being shipped into Qatar to build World Cup stadiums, right? And they're falling to their death. And you're like, oh, man, maybe that probably happened here a lot more in the past. And that's scary, but it's also good that we have what we have. So I agree with you. There's definitely a fine line to balance the two. And maybe our government should focus less on thinking about universal basic income and universal wages. And they need to think more about how do we support small businesses and make it as easy for them to operate as large businesses? Because after all, one of the big American mantras that I hope people get from our channel is that small businesses goals are to become medium-sized businesses in a lot of America. And those medium-sized and small businesses are really the heart of our country. Because once Apple was a medium-sized or small-sized business, Microsoft was a small business out of Bill Gates' garage. All these companies started out of some guy's garage or some small business, or Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola were guys that owned pharmacies and fountain sodas, like these were all individual small business. These global companies didn't start from a government or didn't start from a spin-off, like maybe, some of these other foreign companies did. Right. And that's where the difference lies, is that these American small businesses are really truly the engine of our economy, but also of our nation, not just economically, but like our pride and who we are and our ability to shift American values to other parts of the globe. Mm-hmm. And one thing that it hurts is that now we're getting, now America is getting some Chinese values shipped back here that maybe doesn't really jive with America because our businesses are doing too much business with the Chinese government. So I think that that's one thing that really bothers a lot of Americans, especially a lot of pro-Trump Americans that see that and they're like, man, that's not good. Like we want to keep our own values.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. At the same time, though, if you ask like the typical American, have them go to Walmart or Target or anything like that, and you give them the choice between like, some people made in America, they'll buy it, but for the most part, and I totally understand, like not having enough financial means to like buy like the American product, I can see why they would go for the Chinese products,
Exactly. So here's an example, right? Let's say a toy might be $2.99 made in China. That same toy made in the US might be $5.99. Of course, you're going to buy the $2.99 because it's half price. Right. But what if that $2.99 toy was really $4.99 and, coming from China, and now the American one is still $5.99? Would you buy the American toy? That is a price point that makes it a lot more reasonable for the average American to spend that dollar rather than $3. So that's where I really think the American goal needs to be, rather than, and that's where China's really succeeding in this trade war, because they're preventing the prices, the margins from getting closer. So they're keeping their competitiveness, because if you're within like 20%, somebody's going to buy American, right? That if you're between $5 and $6, somebody's going to spend $6, buy American. Because you know what Walmart will advertise, what these companies will advertise is that they're made here by Americans. So I think that's the difference. As if our tariffs aren't effective enough to change that price point $2, you're not going to get the American buyer to buy the American-made product. That's where the difference lies. We gotta, those differences in margins, they've got to get a lot smaller.
Right. And I guess I guess 2 points to that. I think number one, we should just copy what China does, right? Like China doesn't, like, they made their own Facebook, a version of Facebook, their own version of Twitter, their own version of Amazon, their own and they refuse to let our companies fairly compete. So why maybe we just follow their example and just out
Right.
their stuff until they're willing to let us come into their country and fairly compete with our companies, right?
So the Donald Trump mantra, or the Peter Navarro mantra of trade. Peter Navarro is big on this: trade, free and fair.
Right.
So that's exactly. I'll tell you what. That's exactly how the Trump administration views it. They want free trade, but free trade can't be free if it's not fair. And that's where I think that you're going to see a stark difference. You're not going to see the push that our trade is fair and on par as it was during the Trump administration. You're not going to say, hey, if you want us to do this, you have to purchase, these soybeans, or you have to pay X amount of tariffs to get your products in here. I don't think you're going to see that. And that's going to be something interesting in these coming months, maybe not months, maybe years,
right,
to see if that rolls back, to see if any of these companies, they've had signed agreements, if you see these companies just say, you know what, we're going to stay in China. I'd be interested to see that. They say like 7 or 8% of our goods are currently made in China, or foreign made goods are made in China. Right. So I'd be interested to see if that goes up to 10%. It used to be more. It used to be well more than that. So it's interesting to see that in the coming years.
And then to your point, you were saying okay, would we rather buy a $5 made in America product versus a $4 made in China product, right? But how do we even get to that point? Because in order to be made in America, we need to have, we're paying for American rent, right, in America, which is far more expensive. We're abiding by Department of Labor laws, which means, minimum wage of, the national minimum wage is, going up to, at least in New York, it's going up to 15. I don't know what the national is right now.
There's not a national wage. It's a state issue.
Okay.
That's something we're going to highlight, stuff like that in our videos on YouTube.
Right.
Kind of give you guys an idea what state versus federal in the United States is, because there's very big differences.
Right. But even Florida, all right, New York, I get, and it sucks, but even in Florida, they just passed a bill where the minimum wage is going up to 15. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of ridiculous to me, because I have businesses in Florida, and my workers that I've had for 15 years, they live like kings. So I just feel like
15 in Florida is like 25 in New York City. Yeah, or 30 in New York City.
Right. So this is brand new, but we were paying, I think, like $8 for the longest time. And they're our workers are like a king amongst their community team members, because that's how much they need. They're very happy with it. It's not like New York, where the cost of living is so high. So I think even making that $5 made in USA product, I don't know if it's going to be that easy to make, for it to be. Yeah. I know the numbers, it was an estimate, but I don't think it's going to be so close to be $4 versus $5 unless we add additional tariffs or additional restrictions.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be multifaceted, and this is why it's so important that we put foreign policy pressure on China as well as economic pressure, because what that's going to do is that's going to weaken the regime, and a weaker Chinese regime is going to allow more average Chinese to, I don't want to say rise up, but they're going to extract something, right? Because what happens when look at the George Floyd riots, right, over the summer. What did they extract from our government? They worked on a lot of policy. Yeah. So I think that if you can get even you mentioned the film, the American Worker, the American Factory, Chinese see that and they think, man, we should get some better conditions. Right. So now you're extracting that a little bit, right? So that's one piece to it. Another piece to it is, where's there the human rights issues? That kind of goes, hand in hand. So now it's okay, we want more human rights. Maybe we can't have de facto slave labor over there, where the wages is below the poverty line for even there. So that's a piece of it. piece of it, cost of living in the United States. Why are we building these things in places where there's a good cost of living?
Right.
Okay. These companies, right, they're under pressure to keep their margin. So as a government, without being socialist or communist, are we able to give them tax incentives in order to help their margins stay where they are and increase realistically, right? Because they're publicly traded companies, and we all have 401k retirement plans that are based on these publicly traded companies. So it's all in our best interest to have these companies succeed and keep being profitable. So is the government able to offer something like tax breaks to allow that to happen? Which is why, tax programs decrease their rates are so important. Not just rates for the companies that can afford to hire tax professionals to get around the laws, but smaller companies that can't afford to, mid-sized small businesses who can't afford to do that. Decrease taxes make it so much easier for them. So, and then on top of that, it is, can we automate some items? Can we automate some things that's going to cost less? So it's really important that, much like the Chinese are able to really muster up their whole economy, their government, their social structure to reach a common goal, how can us as Americans do the same in a constitutional republic, right? In our form of government, in our nation, and how can we do the same to really work on changing that disparity? And I think that's probably the best, honestly, that's the best prescription moving forward. It's not one thing, it's not two things, and it's not just us. It's we need foreign policy pressure to achieve those goals over there, and we need domestic pressure to up our output and decrease our costs.
I completely agree with that. My only concern is we talk about this a lot. Like, I don't trust members of our Congress. I respect them, but like there's an incentive for them not to, pass legislation, right? They're lobbied by like the Fortune 500 companies. I'm sure they're begging them not to like implement any like rules,
Always.
Yeah, to like save on costs, right? Like right after, and this is speculation, Trump was saying, I'm going to sign an executive order, bring all the jobs back from China. And then I think around that time, he had a conversation with Tim Cook. And I think because of that conversation, he backtracked. I don't know. It's anecdotal, but it just like, that was a scene of like, that was the timeline. So I was like, wow, what a great idea. Bring the jobs back from China. But then suddenly he just reversed.
Well, they did bring some of the, like Foxconn came over. I'm not sure what the status of that plant is, but they broke ground on it in Wisconsin, I think. So that's major. I think maybe, who knows what goes on behind the scenes, right? Because we only see what we can see. So we have to take it for what it's worth. But I think that he did back down a little bit, obviously. He wasn't as vocal about it, aggressive. I think he was still aggressive behind the scenes, but I think he kind of like realized what I said is that, you could press him on foreign policy and achieve and get just as far as you can while achieving what we can on the domestic front. And I think it was probably enlightening to him. He has businesses. He has, like I said, everybody has 401ks, right? To think that any American politician or any American president doesn't, has zero personal interest in China is ridiculous. They all do. Every single American does, right? We all want our 401ks to high. We all want to retire comfortably because that's the way that our system is. But the fact of the matter is that, some have more direct access and more direct, just more direct, what's the word I'm looking for? More direct interest in China, right? With manufacturing and businesses that they own. So I think that at that point, that's where you kind of got to look and say, well, maybe Tim Cook sees something I don't and knows something I don't, and he helped me, and maybe I need to go on a different front rather than that way. So I think maybe that's where he was going. I think we still saw results throughout his whole term, but at the end of the day, if it's only 4 years of it, while we won't be where we were 4 years ago, we're not going to be where we need to be for sure. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, that's probably the book on that. Like, we needed more than 4 years in order to really affect change. And the big question is are we Are we where we need to be, where we can't revert back, or are we going to revert back? So,
I mean, my hope is because Joe Biden is 78 years old. He's the oldest president coming into office, right? He says he's not going to run for more than one term. So my hope is, despite all his loyalties, despite, even me kind of thinking, and this is my own term, he's a corporate politician, meaning like, lifetime,
yes, he is. He has
lifetime
some history
politician.
with the banks. He is mortgage industry, insurance.
Right, right. So like, I I feel like if we have a chance at all, maybe Biden could be the one, despite his past record, because in the past, maybe again, China wasn't marked as enemy during the Obama administration yet, right? Like, so maybe like now, that he's come into power and Trump has got this ball rolling, he'll actually put together like a competent team and be able to battle China. Just like, we did with Japan, remember like in the 90s, everyone was freaking out about how Japan was going to overtake, America's.
Take our lunch. Take
What?
our lunch.
Exactly, exactly. Like overtake America as the number one like superpower, like the top GDP, and that just didn't happen. So maybe like this could be like a Japan story,
Well, I think it's a lot different though too, because don't forget, after World War II, with the Bretton Woods deals and the way that our trade was set up, we proactively moved a lot of industries to Japan. We basically gave up the steel industry, moved it over to Japan, and said, "Here, rebuild your country," because we just dropped 2 atom bombs on you. It's. I don't disagree with you on that aspect, but I would say that it's two very different types of the way that the trade and their history is. Maybe the average American thinks that it would be similar, but I personally would disagree just based on that. A lot of Japan's industry, let's say, was brought there by the U.S. or helped or spurred on by the U.S. post World War II.
Right.
China came over because they lured companies over with cheap manufacturing and kind of went from there. So I think I see your point where you think that the snowball is rolling too fast down the hill for Biden to really say, like, man, I can't be friendly with China. Like the American people don't want it.
And it's dangerous.
I don't. What's that?
And dangerous.
I mean, that's a whole nother story. But personally, I don't think that it's that far rolling down the hill. And I don't think that enough Americans see it as a problem. And to be honest with you, the people who do see it as a problem are not the Biden voters. The people who see it as a problem are the Trump voters. And the Trump voters just lost an election,
right.
So, I mean, you're at a point right now that it's going to be difficult to really, I think, it's going to be difficult to really sustain a adversarial sort of view of China. So I think that's pretty much all they wrote on that for now.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a wait and see situation. I think we're all on pins and needles, like trying to figure out, is Biden going to be tough on China, or is it going to be a repeat of, the Obama administration? Right?
Yeah, I think China's pretty happy with the choice. For sure.
Well, per my sources is like they don't care between Trump and Biden, and what I've been, the sources that I've been reading from China is they actually like prefer like
the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So they know Trump and they
right. They thought they could they pretty much understand him. They know what he's all about, and but to be honest, like they're very indifferent because they know that like there's bipartisan support against China. So they know that like regardless, it's America does not view China favorably. Period.
I think average Americans are waking up to it, but I don't think our politicians are on board. And part of that is because the CCP has done a good job of keeping them more so in their pocket. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think that's going to change until you start seeing more grassroots House of Representative candidates with no ties to anyone. I don't think that's going to change until you start to see term limits. I don't think it's even going to change unless if you see, I think, what is it, the 17th Amendment, where the direct election of senators, unless if you see senators maybe getting elected by state houses and state senates, you know, that hold themselves accountable to more than just voters, but other politicians too. You know, we're not going to see that stuff until we see changes in how we elect and the makeup of these elected bodies. So, but I mean, you know, that's a conversation for another day because there's a lot to unpack.
Right, there's a lot more. And I guess my last question, because I don't want this to go too long, is like, is there like a way we can force Congress to like disclose like all of their China dealings so we know?
So there's a lot of disclosure laws, right? But one thing that's been really well done in the past is they get around it. And the rule of thumb is if you're in Congress or if you're in government, you don't put contracts in your name. So let's say, I'm going to throw out there because this is a big one, Nancy Pelosi, right? Nancy Pelosi won't have contracts put in her name.
Right.
Okay, this has been gone over a number of times.
Right.
What they will do, they'll put it in her husband's name or her sons and daughters' name. This is why the Hunter Biden thing is so important, right? Because they don't put the contract in Joe's name. They don't say, we're working with Joe Biden. We want favorable treatment from the U.S. government. They put it in Hunter's name. And as a member of the Senate or the House, you're only responsible for what's in your name and your income sheet. Even if you're filing jointly, your adult kid does not file with you. And this is one thing that was so very enlightening when they talked about that Hunter Biden laptop, because they talked about 10% for the big guy. So you really kind of started to see what a lot of people said all along is that, hey, all you're doing is putting it in your brother's name, your son's name, your daughter's name, your grandkid's name, sometimes your husband's name. This is how you're able to be worth $500 million, even though all you've done, you were in Congress your whole life and your husband was a school teacher or whatever, right? Like, you shouldn't be worth this much money. So this is how they're able to get around it. And we're starting to see it with more public disclosure. But, you know, has it gotten to the average voter? I don't know. I don't know if enough Americans see it. But like that's the challenge moving forward.
Well, that's a challenge. And you know, I guess in conclusion of this, you know, our very first video, like, you know, it would be great for us to at the end of every video, maybe brainstorm, come up with ways that you and I and our viewers can take proactive steps to, you know, to make sure that change is effectuated, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of just sitting talking about it and just loathing our Congress and all their you know, like dealings, right? And their profiteering off of like China and all these other places. So you know, this was a very great introduction, really, really informative, and there's so much more we can talk about, but this was like just the introduction. We kind of like highlighted like the issues, the current issues, and then you know, in the weeks to come we'll put up videos and we'll, you know, have specific topics that we'll talk about, and so I'm very much looking forward to that. And to our viewers that like want to know, you know, any additional things, or if you guys want us to do like, you know, a podcast or a video on a certain topic, give us a shout out. What do you think, Jason?
Yep. Drop some questions underneath and we will answer them. We'll try to do a mailbag at the end of all of our videos, or a podcast, I should say. If you want to see anything, a video about the United States, let us know. We'll try to put one together. If not, we'll cover it here if we can. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting time, right? We have a new president getting inaugurated. We have a lot of changes, a lot of things just going on in this country. So we'll see. Yeah,
absolutely. So,
all right.
Yeah, that was our very first episode of Liberated Panda, and we can't wait for the second one. So here's Jason, Angel, signing off, right?
Thanks. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.